Hi, everyone. It is the Eco Project, and we're back. And I am Lisa Heidel, and I'm here with my co-host,
Cristine Seidel.
and we are here with,
Priyanka Surio.
thank you, Priyanka. We are so excited. We've been away for a while. We've had some very exciting things happen. We told you I would let you know where I'm at. I'm in Athens, Greece right now. I almost said Georgia. Athens, Greece right now, and getting ready to hop over to London. And I'm just having a fabulous start to my summer. Cristine, you have some exciting news. Do you care to share?
Sure. Yeah, I am 3 weeks away from marrying the love of my life, and we're about to be embarking on a whole new journey and traveling for a few weeks. And so, yeah, this is definitely a recording where there's a lot of travel, a lot of change, and so we have the perfect guest to be joining us for that. So.
Oh, that's a perfect segue into Priyanka Surio. Okay, Priyanka, I'm going to read your bio. Going to let you add anything after I finish, and then we're going to jump into the questions. Priyanka Surio has been living a nomadic lifestyle for over 2 years across North America, Europe, the Caribbean, and Africa, all while maintaining full-time remote work. She has logged over 60 countries in her travels, much of which is documented in her nonfiction book, Third Culture Kids of the World, which we will be discussing today. Her book explores sustainable travel and the role activism plays in promoting a better world for all. Priyanka is deeply passionate about holistic health and wellness. She practices yoga and mindfulness and works in the private and public sectors of healthcare. She is senior program manager at Redesign Health, a venture capital studio that supports startups at the heart of healthcare innovation, and is an adjunct professor at George Washington University, where she teaches health IT, informatics, and decision making. That is quite
Impressive.
the bio.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies. No, that pretty much covers it. And the one thing I would just add is it's a lot to balance all those different sides of myself. And every time that I embark on the digital nomadic journey in a new place or country, I learn a new side of myself. And so I would say at the heart of all of these pieces is very much a creative entrepreneurial spirit.
I love that. Yeah. I love that you have all of these different facets of yourself that you are integrating as you learn about yourself. I think, as we, move into adulthood, when we're children, we're kind of told who we are, typically from our families of origin. You're good at the logical and analytical and so I think that's a really a cool testimony to the work you do as you're developing your own business as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I have to ask that I'm a traveler as well. I'm a digital nomad. I've had extended stay in one location due to the pandemic, but now that things are opening up, I'm back on the road and I'm out exploring. But you have just blown the doors off. I mean, truly, I'm like 60. I'm like, I can do 60. Okay. So I'm curious, like, what inspired this? And then, tell us a little bit about what you found out about yourself as you've been going to so many different locations.
No, absolutely. So first, I like to just kind of level set on what a digital nomad is. And so it's someone who usually leverages technology or some kind of telecommunications device to stay connected to people and to work remotely or to find means of bringing in income while being location independent, which means that they can work and live from anywhere. And so what inspired this really was, I have to kind of go back to the origin of even how I developed the book, Third Culture Kids of the World. And so I had traveled up to that point, leading up to COVID, which is the year that I spent the time writing and publishing, traveling to countries. And I had amassed 40 countries by that point. And a lot of that was very much exploratory. I didn't necessarily have a whole lot of intention or purpose other than just exploration. And one thing that continued to come up, the more countries that I visited, was wanting to do something with all that knowledge I had gained. And I think during 2020, when really the world kind of stopped moving, I decided to dive deeper internally and see what had changed about me, reflect on all the experiences I had had and how that I had grown as a person over that time. And so it was a very beautiful way to not only give back what I had learned to other people, wanting to understand that, but also for myself, really being able to practice reflection and gratitude for those experiences. And in that, I found that if I ever do have the opportunity to travel again, I'd like to be a bit more nomadic, right? Don't just have one home base, but now I'm exploring other places that have felt like home or other places that I've wanted to test out to see if that can also feel like home. And this was a dream of mine since even before traveling to try this out, but I had never really developed the courage for it or even had the means to do it because of work situations or stipulations being such that you have to go in an office or in an office at least some of the time of the week. And so when we were able to go remote and I got a taste of that, I then began to set preferences for my work environment to be fully remote to allow for this to happen. And I would say a year after the pandemic, when things were starting to get slightly better, I felt a little bit more comfortable to actually start piecing that together and to take the full leap to end my lease in Washington, D.C., which is where I had lived for quite some time, and to actually go nomadic. And that's when I started in the US first, again, being mindful of still the travel restrictions and the logistics that would be challenging in that lifestyle, and to really, get a sense for what would come up for me, not really knowing all the details behind living this lifestyle, but having an idea, drawing on the strengths of being a traveler to help me with this new challenge or chapter in my life. And I think since then, and we can go deeper into so many topics, but since then, I will say so many different sides of myself have emerged. Like I have seen different things come up in different cities that really kind of remind me of who I am. So for example, when I was in New Orleans and I was spending some time there early on in my nomadic journey, just the Southern hospitality culture reminded me of where I grew up in Florida and how people are really generous and very like open. And there's not a lot of personal space. You're very like open to sharing and being close to one another and having that kind of mindset. And then as I continued to move onwards and I was in Arizona, I learned a lot more around like the friendliness and the creativity and the spirituality of the people there. And that had me tapping more into my mindfulness and spirituality practices as well. And so these are just some examples of how different things would come up for me during the journey. And one thing I started doing almost immediately was just journaling all the time on what was coming up, themes, just different experiences, and then kind of going back over time, like almost every quarter, if I can, which is a more logical approach. Again, I kind of use both sides of the brain, but going back every quarter to see, okay, what has come up for me? What has changed? And I think, again, to tie it back full circle, writing the book and writing about my travels gave me this framework almost for constantly being able to practice that reflection and practice that inner work.
Wow. That is so amazing. I think that it's so cool that you just started this whole conversation in something that has continuously shown up with all of the guests that we've had on the Ego Project is, the withdrawal of self in order to intuitively kind of come to alignment, and you withdrew, but went and had different experiences in that withdrawal. So you would go out, have these experiences, then withdraw to reflect, whether it's journal or whatnot, and something would come out about yourself, something you would be enlightened by as to who you intuitively truly are. And so just right off the rip through that experience of going out in the world, but having regular seasons of withdrawal in those journeys to really reflect and be like, this resonates with me. I know this now about myself. That is such a part of the work that I think that in our day-to-day lives that we, are not always consciously aware of needing that withdrawal. You were intentionally going out and withdrawing in order to know yourself more and know yourself from like a very intuitive, true self, and not like the conditioning you probably had gone through up to that point. So, wow, just a very cool open to what we've seen as the pattern with all of our guests in doing that work internally. So thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you. And I would say that withdrawing motion is something I didn't think I would be able to do because I'm much more of an extrovert than an introvert. But I think when I started doing that work, I actually really enjoyed being able to learn and spend that time with myself. And so I would challenge all the extroverts in the room to really actually embrace this side of doing it. And it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be so lonely. It's almost like a necessary piece of understanding, again, like how you present yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think so many extroverts feel like, well, you can only do that if you're an introvert. I need to be with people. I have to be with people. But for you to say, hey, you know, card carrying extrovert here, and actually it's very beneficial for us too, I think is a great word to spread for them as well. So
I also love that you recognize that something could happen, but only through time and reflection will you see what had occurred. I think so often people want to have a big trip or an unorthodox life, and in the midst of it, they're looking for the nuggets. They're digging in the middle of it, and it's pulling them out of the moment because they're looking for, changes in themselves or wisdom or, something that's going to alter who they are. It's like, we have to be in the journey, feel it, be in the moment, and then only through time will we be able to understand how it's formed us. And I think that's so good with the journaling because, and I have to be honest, sometimes I forget to do it, to journal. And then I was like, where was I? What was I thinking? And so thank you for that reminder. I'm going to get back on my journaling. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And I journal in a lot of different ways. And this is something that is also pretty consistent with how I wrote the book and how I will continue to write. I document in a lot of various facets, or I use a lot of different mechanisms. So I'll take photos, I'll do videos, I'll do voice recordings. I will also write. Also, when I'm reading books, I might underline or highlight things that really resonate with me. And sometimes I'll even put a little note and a date. So this, it's kind of all over the place. But when I go back to those things, when I'm doing that period of reflection, which again is so necessary, I think, to carve out the time for that, then I can see like what came up for me, or what kind of mental state was I in, or like I can be drawn back into what that moment was like when I'm watching a video or looking at pictures. And so I actually recommend journaling in so many different ways, not just necessarily writing, but also digital journalism.
Yeah, which is great for those of us that are not writers. We are intimidated by journaling in that traditional sense, but I think you're right. There are so many different modalities of being able to document in that moment something that's resonating with us. So I appreciate that reminder for myself, because I'll oftentimes avoid it because I'm like, well, I'm not going to have this, very, amazing documentation in my writing. So, it feels very rudimentary to me. So to be reminded that I could take pictures or do voice memos, I think that's another way to tap into those of us that are a little intimidated to withdraw in that way.
I see a lot of people will buy a journal and it's so beautiful, and they'll go and they spend more time going to the store to pick it out, and then they're fearful to even start. And I just learned I'm sloppy with it. I bullet point, I doodle, and if anyone ever saw it, I'm sure that they would be like, ooh, what was going on here with this one? But that's okay because I know what's going on with this one, right? So that type of thing. So, oh, that's so good. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the ego work that you've done. I know for me, being on the road, being, immersed in a new culture, trying to learn the language. I mean, the ego work that I'm doing is constant. I've been pretty much navigating Athens with Yasis, which is hello and goodbye. Okay. That's about it. But I'm doing my best, and but it really humbles you. So I'm curious about the ego work you've done, Priyanka, as you've been on the road.
Absolutely. And so I think there's a lot of different things and practices that I've had to kind of rely on to get me through being on the road. And so I'll kind of like walk through each of those and give an example of them. And so the first one I will say is, I call it a thought walk. And this is something that I kind of created where it's mindfulness, but I also paired it with Maslow's hierarchy. Maslow's hierarchy being kind of like how you get to self-actualization, but from a place of like, what are my basic human needs? And then you continue to go up from there, love and belonging and community, physical safety, and then self-actualization. And so I'll often do that at some point in my journey to kind of ask myself, like, do I have the things I need? And that also means giving myself enough time to do that. So when I first arrive, I didn't used to be a traveler in this way where I would always have like an itinerary. Now I like to have that space of like, let me make sure I've got all the things I've needed for this trip to be, you know, a good trip for me. Let me kind of give myself time to explore what's around me and to soak in what's going on and to ask myself these questions around whether I have my basic needs for food, water, shelter, around whether I can feel safe or have avenues to access something if I don't feel safe, or to alert people of where I'm at. And then like, okay, where are community gatherings happening? What's important to people here in this culture? How can I begin to tap into that in an authentic and respectful way? And so the thought walk. And also along with that, it gives me a chance to like literally take a walk. So it gives me a chance to kind of see what's around me and begin to develop that resilience for navigating and getting around a place. And so it's kind of serves two purposes. The next one I call nonviolent communication, and it's actually a practice that you kind of take where you begin to kind of understand more around body language. You pick up on like some other cues, and you do try to kind of take more of a posture of listening and observing versus judging. So you don't go in with expectations. You don't go in with your own perspective. You go in like you're a learner, like you don't know anything, and like you're there to really kind of take in what someone is going to share with you, and to not have like, this is wrong or this is a right way. And along with that, I try to learn a couple of phrases. And so to the extent that I can use other languages to communicate, I try, and I'll use a couple of different tools like Google Translate or Duolingo, or even just kind of like talking with my driver who's driving me from the airport to my hotel or Airbnb or place of accommodation, just to get a sense of like, what's hello, what's thank you, what's you're welcome, you know, what's good morning, good afternoon. And so these things kind of help me break ground. And I think when people can see that you're trying and that you're willing to kind of learn a couple of these languages, particularly mother tongues, then it goes a long way. And so, for example, I'm in Senegal, and predominantly the main language is French, but their mother tongue is Wolof. And so, sure, I could, you know, use some of my very broken French to communicate, but I really took that extra initiative to learn some phrases in Wolof. And the two phrases that I ended up using so consistently were Nagadef, which is hello, how are you? And Jerjef, which means thank you so much. And I would just continue to kind of use those, even sometimes when I wouldn't know words. I would often open up that way and end that way. And it always brought like a smile to people's faces. Or they'd be like, oh, you know, some Wolof. And when I would also use that or capture those moments on video and share them with different people who are following my journey, I would have certain people say, oh, I know Wolof, or I'm from this region, or how do you know that? And it would begin to open this conversation up beyond myself as to, again, the cultural practice of this place. And the last thing I would say in terms of what's come up for me and how I navigate on the road is really practicing gratitude and making sure that when I am on the road and I am in these places, I'm not just escaping certain things or just avoiding them by being immersed into that environment. I'm actually being grateful for being here. I'm being grateful for the things that I also don't have that I'm now having to practice some kind of like resilience for. And so again, sometimes in some of the countries that I visit throughout Africa, I have to be really mindful that I cannot consume the water the same way the locals can. And so that brings to mind for me being grateful for the fact that living in America, I don't even have to think about that. And so there's gratitude in both ways, both gratitude for being in the place and being within the community and understanding how they navigate, and then gratitude for back home or wherever is home base or where I'm from, and understand like, okay, this is why I'm grateful for where I'm from and how I can practice that gratitude there as well. And so that's something that I often weave into my practices.
Wow, that is so awesome. It's so funny that you brought up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because just as we started this conversation, question popped up in my mind, and on my notebook right here, I wrote Maslow's hierarchy. So,
Alignment.
yeah, I love that. So I do have a question about that, because, we do know like some of the fundamental needs that we have is a sense of belonging, is a sense of connection. And so, do you grapple with that, as you travel into cultures that, you may feel like you do belong in and it's easier to connect, versus cultures that you may be struggling with, or, how do you grapple with that with your sense of home, or the people that you consider, your family, back home, so to speak, because as a nomad, I'm curious, how do you have times where you feel very isolated, where you feel like that need isn't being met, and how do you work through that?
No, absolutely. I will say that being on the go and moving around, to the extent that I was when I first started out on the journey, loneliness and that missing out on certain like family and friends, whether it's like celebrations or moments, definitely cropped up a lot. And I think I could have decided to stay in that mindset of like, I'm missing out, I'm feeling lonely. But an interesting thing that happened for me, like even being an extrovert, it's still very scary to go in a place where you don't know anyone and to try to like make a friend, and then to know whether this is going to be a reliable and trustworthy connection. But what it did is it kind of forced me to increase those chances, like to go out everywhere, to make at least like a friend or some kind of connection, or to learn something. And I would also do research on the places as well, and to see if I could connect with some kind of group, community or group or something.
Right.
And so it just kind of forced me to do that more and more, and allowed me to get out of my comfort zone in that way, and to be comfortable with getting out of my comfort zone in that way, to where I found more and more opportunities to develop a friend or two in these places. And oftentimes that would also mean I would pick certain accommodations to increase that likelihood. So I would either live in like hostels for a little bit, especially when I was first starting out the journey, or co-living spaces, or I would go to co-working spaces as well. Again, just to increase that. Or I would do like meetup groups or local tours or something. And so I would find that would like increase the likelihood that I would meet more people, and I would just kind of ask questions, be very open to listening. And that would teach me a lot more than just kind of like walking around and trying to figure it out alone. And so it's that reliance on other people, and understanding how important that is, and how crucial it is that all these people, it's kind of like that concept called Sonder, where every person has like a unique story and challenges that they're facing on their own, like outside of our own awareness. And so thinking about that with each person, each person is a book, they have their own story.
Right.
And so I kind of adopted that mindset, and an interesting thing happened where I would sometimes then run across some of these people who were also nomadic. Just naturally, I would like meet people who were also nomadic, or somehow I would begin to develop really strong connections to where I could come back to these places, meet up with these people, sometimes even be hosted by these people or their families, or travel with them. And so slowly began this journey of developing these connections, which has been happening in ongoing work over the past 2 years, to where I had now a sense of community or sense of base whenever I'm visiting some of these places. And slowly I've refined this nomadic journey to be more of like a nomadic route, where I kind of go to places repeatedly along the journey, because I know that I'll have like a sense of home community there, and I'll have a group of friends waiting for me there. And it's beyond family now. So it's kind of grown naturally and organically in that way.
And Lisa, I think that's similar to something that you experienced too in your traveling.
Sorry.
Isn't that similar to something that you've experienced too in your traveling, of curating kind of these relationships and a sense of connection with others that you can come back to as part of this lifestyle?
Definitely. And I'm so grateful for these relationships that, I would never have had if I hadn't ventured outside my comfort zone. People that, I met along the way, and, that have become like family, as, Priyanka said, it becomes your travel family, really. And and it does take the edge off the loneliness, doesn't it? To
Yes.
know that you can return somewhere if you need to, or if you want to, that, you're not just untethered out here floating around, that you have some ground points around you to bring you back, to anchor you back in. So I love that you said that. And I think so often people look at the social media journey, right? And the social media journey is just snapshots of
Yeah.
moments.
Yeah.
And in reality, we're living our everyday life and we're working full time. There's some days that I don't leave the computer, because I'm working. I'm not out having, experiences and meeting people, but because, we are digital nomads, we're working, right?
Yep.
And I think people sometimes kind of get this skewed idea of what is happening, that it's like an extended vacation,
Mhm.
Mhm.
that idea. And it's really not. I mean, it's a lifestyle. You
Right.
are living your life and it's a lifestyle. Do you find that as well, Priyanka?
I really appreciate you saying that because absolutely, there have been so many times where people will say you're living the dream. And I'll say I'm living a type of dream, you could say, but just like dreams, there can be bad parts too. There can be nightmares that happen when you're dreaming. And so it's not an easy life, actually. That's one thing that I would definitely make sure people kind of understand is it's not very easy. Your health is going to take a toll. And there are times where I have to slow down because I just cannot keep up physically anymore with kind of moving or being about. And sometimes that means I have to kind of figure out, okay, where am I going to hunker down to rest and recuperate and recover? And this is a conversation I've actually been having more frequently with a lot of my very avid traveling friends and other nomadic friends, is that like they've been having health issues too. And so some of that is also creating an accountability circle to where you can share and be vulnerable in that space and say like, hey, like how's your health? Like, how are you doing? Are you doing what you need to do to take care of that? And even reminding myself through those conversations that I need to do that as well. And so I've taken more opportunities now to slow down where I can and to spend longer periods of time in a place, or maybe to go back to a place that's easier for me to navigate, because some places are easier just because there's more access to resources or healthcare, or it's just, you don't have to think so much because it may be similar to how you grew up in terms of the culture or the practices, and other places are harder. And when you are in a new environment, that is challenging, whether or not you realize that. And I think when we're traveling, we don't often realize that because the time that you're traveling or vacationing is so short that you don't have enough time to really fully understand that your body and your mind is going through all these challenges. And it's over before you start. But when you're on the road and you're living in that place, over time, it can take a toll because you are having to adapt and you are having to kind of break new grounds. And it's almost like learning a new subject, taking on a new job. Like these are challenging things. And so I'm glad that you brought that up because it is a lot more challenging, I think, than people give credit for it. At the same time, it can be incredibly rewarding to what we just talked about. You build a global family and a community of sorts. I think you learn so much about yourself and different aspects of who you are. And they even build on themselves in terms of like, maybe I can do this business for myself, or maybe I can pursue this passion or this opportunity. And just things happen to you that never would have happened if you had just stayed where you were. And so I don't regret any of the decisions or places that I've been, though I am very aware how they've taken tolls on me as well.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you said that. I think people don't realize, well, like you said, it's physical
Mhm.
demands on your body, but it's also the mental. I mean, when you're in your home country, you don't think about going to the grocery store. You just go to the grocery store, and, I'm working in the second language and I go to the grocery store. I have to schedule time out and, I'm eating a lot of carrot-based foods because I recognize the word grotto.
When in doubt, order that.
Exactly.
You go with what you know, exactly. If you start out
Yeah.
very small, you're actually
And it's
you're not getting all your comforts.
exactly. So it's a strain on your mental health as well and your emotional health. And, but once again, those moments of connection and those moments of awe and the confidence building that it gives you. I mean, the payoff it's priceless. I truly believe that. Yeah. So thank you for, sharing that, because, when we're not talking about it with others, we don't recognize that it's universal among people who are experiencing it. Yeah.
I agree. And I think because as a nomad, everyone's journey that I've talked to is different. Like even how you move, where you move, what you're experiencing. There may be themes, but each person's journey is different. And so one thing that is really important is for us to not compare ourselves to people who are not living this lifestyle, definitely. But even with other people who are living this lifestyle, because each of us is experiencing something different. And we're all amassing like such valuable knowledge and know-how of how to navigate the world, which is a big, scary, beautiful, diverse place. And so I think there's just so much to that of like understanding that you yourself are building up your own like repository of knowledge and experience that's valuable and stands on its own. And you cannot compare that to anything else. And you can't be kind of having those feelings of self-doubt or like, am I doing good enough, or I'm falling behind here, because again, you've chosen this like very extraordinary life.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a question I have for you. I think, specifically, being a woman living this lifestyle, I'm curious, our wounded ego is the conditioning that we kind of, grew up with, and we find ourselves, having a lot of conversations of I should be doing this, or I could be doing that. So I'm curious, what kind of healing of that ego woundedness maybe, or the conditioning that you had leading up to this, have you had to kind of navigate through, as far as I should be this, or should be that, or I could, would, should, anytime those kind of voices start picking up, what have you noticed you've needed to kind of be aware of as you like maybe spoke to friends and family about, hey, I'm going off and I'm going to have this experience, what kind of things arose for you in that decision?
Absolutely. I appreciate this question, because I will say that I've gotten a lot of mixed responses from family around this lifestyle choice, and even in terms of how I've decided to build up my career. When I was growing up, like my parents are immigrants, so they had a very kind of like work hard, pick really safe, risk-averse professions to pursue. None of this creative stuff, like that's not going to make you money. And so certain doors when I was younger were automatically closed, or I was like dissuaded from pursuing them. And in that path, I realized I wasn't happy. At first, I didn't know that, but I knew something wasn't sitting well. And I think the first time that I kind of got out of that mindset was when I did decide to kind of live on my own, when I went off to college away from home. And I was 17 at the time. And so I had a taste of like that real independence, if you will. And I've always been an independent person, but I really got a true taste of that. And then since then have been living on my own. And I think that played a role into making me feel more confident in pursuing my own path. But it has definitely been met with resistance from my family in terms of, what are you doing? Is this safe for you? This seems like risky, but then it'll work out, and there'll be this like renewed confidence in what I'm doing, whether it's me moving out of state to Washington, D.C., which is the first place I went to after Florida. And there being questions around that. But then eventually when they saw that I made it, or I was able to sustain and live on my own and then go to grad school, they're like, okay, she's doing okay. But then there were questions about like, okay, what about relationships or marriage or kids? And I still get that. And so it's kind of like, I've had to learn to be very confident in myself and stand on that grounding of like, I'm doing what is best for me. And I may not get the full 100% backing of my family, or some of my friends will be like, do you know what you want? Like, it seems like you don't know what you want, or this or that. And I'm like, me going to these places is not me escaping or not knowing. It's actually me running towards myself, me understanding and growing towards and into myself. And the more that I do this, the more that I realize how expansive I am. And I want to embrace that. And I think some friends are not going to be here for that, or they'll be confused about it. And others will be here for it. And I think I've had to, again, learn to surround myself with people more frequently, at least, that are healthy for my mental health, that are healthy for my ego, as I do this really difficult kind of work of living this lifestyle, of exploring new avenues, of exploring myself and breaking these molds, because I'm breaking a lot of molds of like even jobs, of even lifestyle, of even what is expected of me from my family, of, you know, having kids and all these things. And I want to have those things, but in my own time. And so as I'm breaking that mold, it's helpful for me to be around people who are championing that, who are supporting that, and to remind myself that it's okay that I'm doing this versus surround myself with that negativity. And I think I'm just going to have to be okay with that taking time too. Like eventually I think family will come around, but it will take them time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that resonates so much of what you're saying is also a previous conversation that we've had with Haley and Hannah with Twins and Talent of, you know, the need to leave that family of origin, you know, in some way, shape or form, like, you know, going to Washington DC, you know, to be able to really kind of have clarity as to what is right for me. What is that voice that I continue to hear whispering to me to seek that is true to who I am and may not necessarily have looked the same as my family of origin, but needing that space to be able to explore, even from, you know, a proximity perspective of not having, you know, voices of conditioning, even, you know, very close to us from, you know, a physical standpoint, so that you can start hearing that whisper of true self a little bit louder, and in that growing that confidence to explore, you know, your journey and your sense of self from a healed perspective. And that doesn't have the, you know, the sounds of, you know, there's something wrong with you, you know, there's something that's not right, this isn't good. Even from that well up within ourselves, I think is a key piece of is just being able to remove yourself from that environment at times to be able to hear it a little bit clearer.
And I would say that you're not going to get this right at first. So some of the first like early friendships that I formulated outside of like my family or when leaving my family were not always healthy. And I didn't realize that until a little bit later when some of my friends who may have been within sororities or group organizations were much more focused on like, what are you doing with your career? Or what's your status like versus like this unconventional lifestyle. And it came up later when they're like, what are you doing? Or they would have critiques or judgments actually about that. And it's not what I needed from a friend. And so I began to realize that not all friends were good and true friends. And I didn't know that when I first kind of left the environment that I had been conditioned in to think like there's only one way or you should be fitting some mold. And it was only once I had kind of continued to expand outside of that and have different experiences. And as I continue to have different experiences, that I realized to be a bit kinder to myself, a bit more patient with myself, and to understand that there are people who are going to kind of accept all of who I am, and it's not conventional, and they're going to be here to support me along the journey. And some people are not.
Yeah, it's absolutely true.
It's very wise. And that's really, you know, that's a lifetime journey. You know, some people that were friends, you know, many years ago that you thought would be lifetime friends actually fade out because, you know, you take different paths. So I think that's so important to look at that malleability of friendships and how they're always evolving or devolving. That's very good. You know, and I love the idea of embracing that maybe we are seeking something. Aren't we always seeking for understanding? And so when people say, well, why are you doing this? Like, well, because I feel compelled to do it. You're asking me to tell you what my future self knows. My future self isn't here yet. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, you know, that's part of this evolution that we're in, and, you know, this journey that we're on. So thank you for saying that. And I love that idea of, you know, kind of watching it all unfold, right? That's what everyone's doing. Yeah.
And it's hard to answer those questions in the moment too. Just to drop back to what we talked about before about reflecting and carving out the time and space to withdraw. Like I'll get these questions immediately from people when I return from a trip or when I've returned back to one of the bases or when I come back to people. And it's like, I don't have the answers yet because I'm still reflecting. I'm still catching up with myself, even from a couple months ago, like things are coming up for me. And I won't fully have an answer until I've kind of like stayed still for a bit and
Yeah.
taking time to really think about what has changed and what has happened.
Mm.
I think that part is really difficult sometimes to communicate with people who, again, only see you in a certain box, or who
Right.
have already kind of made up their mind about you, or even family, because they don't understand that you're constantly changing, and that you're also constantly trying to understand, like, who have I changed into? Who have I become? Because it's happening in the moment, right? So I think it's really important what you said, Lisa, about let me get back to you. Like, I'm in that transformation right now.
Yeah, like you have permission to say that, right? Like giving yourself permission to be like, hey, I'm still through that, going in that process. And, in one of our previous conversations, Joy Malik was talking about how, that intuitive understanding is really in giving ourselves time to look at the patterns of what we've experienced, and then kind of withdrawing and seeing what makes sense about that pattern, to then know what is it that this means for me. And that does take time. And I think, like you said, a lot of times, people who have been part of our lives, from an early age, want to know, what meaning does this have right now? But to give ourselves permission to say, I'm still sitting with that for a little while. I'm still trying to figure out what that actually means, is okay. That just means we're still part of that intuitive process that will come, but that's for us to know when that is. And then it's also, we also have permission to share that when we're ready.
I agree. And like, there's no rush. I think sometimes, and even like the conditioning that young people have is like, you have to get all these milestones. You have to check the boxes on all these things, high school, then college, if not that, then job, then, finding the right partner, marriage, kids, house, like there's all these check boxes. And I think when you break away from that and you realize, like, does this actually make me happy? It doesn't. Then that's where the exploration occurs. And I think I had started on that path of like checking the boxes. And one day I kind of woke up after reaching like what I thought was the dream job, having gone to grad school and being in a relationship, and then realizing that relationship wasn't working. It kind of was like the kind of tipping point to like, I did the things and I'm not happy. And so I need to stop that trajectory of what is the successful American dream life and define what is my own dream. And that's kind of what I'm doing. And again, it's more about this journey that I'm on. And so, yeah, I just kind of wanted to note that too.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you for, like you said, having the courage to step out of what you are supposed to do at this age and in this time, and kind of saying, no, I'm going to stop this ride right now and take a pause and see if there's another way. So I think that's awesome. Good for you.
Well, can we go ahead and touch upon the Global Citizen Pledge that's included in your book? I'm curious about that. And I think it ties in with everything that we've been talking about. So I'm going to let you kind of explain what it is, and then Cristine and I are going to share our thoughts on it. So can you tell the people what Global Citizen Pledge is?
Yes. So I have my book in front of me, and I'll kind of summarize it the best way I can, or if I have the time to actually read it, I'd be happy to.
Absolutely.
I love it. Okay. So I wrote this 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And what's interesting is now that I'm been living this nomadic lifestyle, so much of this resonates and are things that I've actually put into practice. So it's not even just something I wrote about and reflected on. It's also something I practice pretty regularly as I navigate different countries and regions. But I'll just kind of read it to you. So, Global Citizen Pledge. First, I take a breath and then tune into my surroundings while in self-reflection. I pledge to be mindful. I recognize what motivates my journey to this place. My motivations do not harm the people or the planet. I pledge to always find out the truth, which may include the occasional or frequent checking of my privilege, bias, or blessings. I notice the people, the culture, the creatures, and the environment, and my role in this unfolding story at this moment in time. I pledge to be open-minded. I understand that if I wish to enrich my experience and make a lasting, authentic connection, I must love these people as they are without judgment and embrace their culture in the way it's meant to be, so long as I'm not harming myself or compromising my beliefs in the process. And if something comes across my path that conflicts with or challenges my beliefs, I'll remember my pledge to be open-minded. I know this journey will be a roller coaster of emotions and experiences on the best of days. I also know that I may not always know better and accept the unfortunate reality of not acting better as a result. I pledge to forgive myself and others for our ignorance. I pledge to overcome my fear of challenging myself to change for the better. In my personal growth, I pledge to be resilient. If I have doubts, I begin with love, first for myself, and then once I know this, love for others. I pledge to love and promote all cultures, for they are significant in our collective human history or humanstry. Parallel to this, I pledge to fight for those communities that still face an unequal world every day and to give back whenever and however I can. I take the time to slow down and explore sustainable travel mindsets. I know that my travels will become more sustainable and repeatable over time. My personal growth will manifest infinity. I am a global citizen, a mindful traveler, and a captain of my journey, and I will keep my inner compass pointed at the core of life on this planet, which is love. Love for all people, cultures, creatures, and environments.
Okay, now I'm teared up.
That's not your work. I do not
I
know.
know, yes.
Oh,
Oh, what a
that is
beautiful,
amazing.
yeah, that's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Mhm.
Oh, I did too. I honestly, I want to just sit here and cry. That is so beautiful. Thank you. Oh my God, thank you.
Thank you for letting me share. I will say 3 things kind of manifested this, and then I'm happy to kind of dive in wherever you feel is helpful. But activism was the first kind of like inspiration behind the pledge. There was like the Black Children's Joy Pledge that I kind of drew from to build out some of these sections. And that was during the time of the civil rights movement in the 60s. And so I drew on that as inspiration. I also drew on like other inspirations around the leave no trace behind principles, which is around sustainability. I also drew in mindfulness practice in here, which is why there's a lot of like slow down, take a deep breath, observe what's around you. And then one of the things that kind of make up my branding, just as a traveler, and even with the book, is this concept of universal love. And it really is kind of this unconditional love, not having judgments, really allowing people to be themselves. And so I kind of take that and weave that in throughout the pledge as well.
Love that. Yeah.
And as a traveler, you know, so much ego work comes up, right? Like, you know, defensiveness or feeling like you don't belong, or, you know, that you're not doing it right, as you said. And, you know, to return to that pledge of, you know, I am in the moment, I am here, I approach it with no expectations, with humbleness, and allow the experience to teach me what I need to learn. And do it with love and acceptance. That is so beautiful, Priyanka.
Yeah.
I want that tattooed on my body somewhere.
Well, and I also think, you know, for those of us that can't live the nomadic life right now, but do want to go and experience other places, other cultures, you know, I think, especially coming from, you know, being in the US and having the privilege that we have, you know, going into other spaces and really checking in with what are some of our unknown biases or unintentional biases that we need to be aware of, you know, and the conditioning that we've been through. I've, you know, been on vacations with people that will complain about this, or they'll talk about that. And, you know, just really showing up into other areas, other cultures with that unconditional love of, I don't need to judge what this place is. I just need to be available to experience and to be of service in whatever way I possibly can. To go through travel with that mindset, it's not so much about like, what is this for me? What am I getting from this? What is the, you know, like people do when they go on vacation, is I need to reset, but then they oftentimes go on vacation and have a lot of biases and in a negative mindset and come home like unrefreshed. So I think to even have that pledge as you navigate short, you know, trips or short experiences helps you really be available to the experience and what it is for you, and then also what and how you can be in service to others. So I love that, being somebody who can't necessarily live that lifestyle.
I agree. And I wanted to say two things. Like, one, you don't have to live this lifestyle to be a global citizen, or to adopt these mindsets. Like, these are things that you can practice in your backyard, in your home. And I love what you said, Cristine, about different spaces. So it's really just entering different communities and places and spaces. We have Juneteenth coming up. And so there's a lot of history connected with that around really, truly the end of slavery, which we thought happened during the Emancipation Proclamation, but the message didn't quite make it as far as some communities. And so a lot of communities were still in enslavement, and people took advantage of that. And so this actually celebrates when all and Black Americans were free. And so thinking about and honoring space for that, and to allow people to, this is a celebration, and this is a holiday that just became a national holiday 2 years ago.
Right.
And so for people to say, oh, we're past that. Well, no, we just actually recognize this as a holiday, and to allow for people to share that, to share their experiences, to share their oral history and legacy connected to that is so important, versus wanting to just to move on. And another story I have of this is when I visited a friend in Hawaii. He's indigenous and Mexican, but he was visiting Hawaii. He was already very well tuned into practice and gratitude for the earth. And so before we even started on the hike, we were on a group hike. He's like, let's take a moment to appreciate the sky and the earth and the ground. And it was like, instead of rushing off, I like allowed him to teach me this kind of gratitude and this practice. And so it's allowing for people to kind of share that versus like rushing to the next thing. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the results, the outcome, like the what's the next thing. And we get frustrated with the slowness or the things we don't understand, or the things we think we're over or past, without allowing for space for them. And so you absolutely can experience so many different things and cultures and ways and perspectives, even in your backyard, if you look for them and if you're open to them.
Yeah. Oh,
Woo.
Oh,
Okay.
I see it next week, possibly, Priyanka. I think it's
no,
right.
right? Absolutely. I love that. Yes. Even just that gratitude for our spaces, and to celebrate those spaces, whether it is like a holiday or a hike or whatever, just that mindfulness of experiences. So yeah,
So
I
good.
moved clearly.
Well,
Good.
Priyanka, tell us where you're heading to next. We're very curious.
Yeah, so right now I'm in the New York area, and I'll be on the East Coast for a little bit of time, probably toggling between New York and DC. Generally, when I'm on the East Coast, I try to, again, connect back to those bases. But actually, a very exciting thing happened more recently, where I was invited to the Caribbean island of Bonaire for their yoga and wellness festival. And so I'll be actually hosting a workshop around journey within. And it will be all around kind of exploring the journey within yourself as you kind of navigate different spaces and places. So again, this is actually a very nice preview or tie into that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's where I'll be going next, as my next kind of outside of America place. I'll be going to the Caribbean next.
Oh, exciting.
So, well, we will be sharing all of Priyanka's information in our description box, including any events that she wants to let people know. We'll go ahead and include those. So get those to me, Priyanka. And we'll share her website and her Instagram account so that you can follow along on her adventures. Priyanka, is there anything that you want to offer before we leave?
Oh, I would just say, we touched on a lot of topics, and I think that, kind of along the thread of like the journey and the reflection piece of this, I think it's important for people to understand that there is no kind of expectation on how long this journey will take, whether you're traveling or whether you're reflecting internally and you're in one place. But understand that your life can be sonder, can be multifaceted if you just allow for it to be, if you just connect with these different people, cultures, and places, and giving yourself the time and space to actually fully realize that versus getting to an outcome is important.
I love that.
Cristine, do you have anything to say?
No, I so appreciate you sharing with us today. And I think that, like you just said, your experiences are, such a reflection of not only this external journey, but that internal journey that we are all kind of called to. And I think that, for those of us that are hearing that whisper and responding to that whisper, whether it's through a nomadic life or through just an internal journey of healing and understanding and of resonance. I think that you are kind of the epitome of that in all that you're doing right now. And so, tell us where is your book, do you have a website for your book? Is it on booksellers websites? Where can we find your book, and how can we find more out about that?
Yes. So Third Culture Kids of the World, which is my first book, is around sustainable travel, can be found on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, and in several bookstores across the US, as well as Africa and Europe. So again, you can kind of reach out to me through PS Travel Stories, which is my handle on Instagram and Twitter. My website I will be sharing with everyone as well, and you can kind of follow along in my adventures, but it is on major booksellers, marketplaces, etc. And I continue to kind of go around each place I go to and leave a copy behind. So it's ended up in
Congratulations on that. That's amazing.
Wonderful. All right, Priyanka, we would love to have you back in the future. And so, stay tuned, make sure everyone, follow us, subscribe so when Priyanka and other guests will be on. And of course, Cristine and I will be having other conversations about different topics around mental health and spirituality and therapeutic modalities and just pretty much anything we want to talk about. Okay, everyone. So once again, thank you, and like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.